You've been taught that the Allies were the good guys, and mostly they were. But on the night of February the 13th, 1945, they burned a city full of refugees to the ground. Whether that makes them wrong is a question historians are still fighting over. Dresden was known as the Florence of the Elbe. It was a city of Baroque palaces, grand churches, and streets so architecturally remarkable that tourists had been traveling from across Europe to see them for centuries. By February 1945, it was also packed with refugees, hundreds of thousands of Germans fleeing the advancing Soviet forces, flooding into a city that had never once been bombed during the entire war. They'd come on foot, by cart, by whatever transport they could find, through one of the coldest winters in living memory. Families who had lost everything except each other. Wounded soldiers transferred from hospitals further east. Civilians who had been walking for weeks. They arrived in Dresden because Dresden felt safe, because Dresden had never been touched, because Dresden, surely, would not be next. They were wrong. The first wave of 240 RAF Lancasters arrived just after 10 o'clock at night. They encountered no opposition, no fighters, almost no anti-aircraft fire. In roughly 15 minutes, they dropped high explosives first. This was deliberate. The blast weapons shattered windows, tore off rooftops, and exposed the timber frames of buildings, opening them up like kindling ready to be lit. Then came the incendiaries, thousands of them, cascading down across the city center simultaneously, igniting hundreds of individual fires at once. What happened next is what separates Dresden from an ordinary bombing. The fires were close enough together and intense enough that they began to merge. As they merged, the combined heat rose sharply, and as hot air rose, cold air was pulled in from the surrounding streets to replace it. That inrushing air fed the flames more oxygen, which made them hotter, which pulled in more air. The cycle accelerated. Within hours, Dresden was no longer burning. It was being consumed by a self-sustaining atmospheric event, a firestorm with winds strong enough to tear people off their feet and pull them back into the flames they were trying to escape. The temperature at the firestorm's core exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius. Metal melted, stone crumbled, trees exploded from the heat of their own resin. People's shoes fused to the asphalt as they ran. And 70% of those who died did not burn to death at all. They suffocated, as the firestorm stripped the oxygen from the air around them, reaching even into the cellars where thousands had taken shelter. The second wave arrived 3 hours later. Over 500 bombers, more than twice the size of the first. They flew over a city already entirely ablaze, visible from hundreds of miles away, and dropped their loads into the inferno. Among those underground was an American prisoner of war named Kurt Vonnegut, sheltering 2 stories below street level in a meat locker beneath a slaughterhouse. When the all-clear finally sounded, his guards brought him to the surface. The city was gone. Not damaged. Gone. American bombers returned the following afternoon, and again on February the 15th. By the time it was over, more than 3,900 tons of bombs had fallen on Dresden, and 90% of the historic center was ash. When the fires finally died down, the recovery began, and it was weeks before the full scale of the dead became clear. So many bodies were pulled from the rubble that the city's authorities had no choice but to cremate them in the open air, in public squares, in full view of the survivors who were still trying to find their families among the ruins. The argument about whether Dresden needed to happen has never been settled, and perhaps it never will be. Most fires in history leave something behind, a building code, a safety regulation, a rule that means the next city, the next theater, the next factory is a little harder to burn. Dresden left none of that. No regulatory body convened. No new standard was written. The firestorm that consumed it in a single night was not an accident to be prevented. It was a decision. And the only question it left behind was whether that decision was justified. 70 years later, historians are still fighting over the answer.